Hey folks, Matthew with Tactical Comms. I've got a special video for me that I want to share with you, and it's the origins of how Tactical Comms got into emergency communications. And it starts with my dad. This video will post on Father's Day 2025. And it's especially special for me because my dad has been diagnosed with dementia. And I wanted to tell his story. More importantly, I wanted him to tell his story. And I want to share with you that being involved in radio and in technology and communications actually has helped Dad and has helped him keep his mind occupied, to keep his, for lack of better words, is keeping his brain active. The neurologist tells us that it's important we keep him mentally active. And communications, emergency communications and radios is one way that he enjoys doing that. So I want to encourage you all, listen to Dad, listen to our conversation, and it's a great story. I hope you'll watch it. It's the longest video I've ever produced, and love to hear feedback from you. And also just remind you that, sometimes things are difficult, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Hey folks, Matthew with Tactical Comms here, and I've got a special treat today for this video. I've got my dad, James, and part of our beginning series that we're working on is how do you get started in communications? And so for me, my start to communications, emergency communications, and the things that I've got to do started with the influence my dad had on me. And so I want to welcome my dad, James, to the channel, and we're just going to have some conversations. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right today.
Good. Good. Well, how did you get started in radios? How did you get started in communications?
Well, actually, I got started with my family, especially my oldest brother, who was 7 years older than me. And he got into ham radio, and I just kind of hung around him all the time to see what he was doing. And so that's kind of the way it got started.
And your brother Lewis passed. His call sign was K4RDL, I believe, at the time. And there was some significance because he would have been KN4RDL when he started, right?
He was, yeah.
Because there was something significant back in those days. There was a time limit when you got your novice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I believe it was 2 years. 1 year or 2 years, I can't remember now, that you had to complete your moving up to from novice to general. And I think that was within 1 year, and if you didn't make it in a year's time, you had to start all over again.
Now, novice was the entry level.
Yeah.
And then if you
it was code only.
Code only, Morse code only. And when you started at novice, or once you upgraded to general, something happened to your call sign, right?
Yeah, you could get rid of the N in the KN4RDL or whatever. WN4LZT was my original call sign for Morse code. And then when I moved on up to general, then it became WB4 LZT.
Well, and that's the significance of my call sign, because when Lewis was in his final days, us and your younger brother Lynn, we were having some conversations and found out that your dad's, my grandfather's call sign, when he first got it, was KN4SWB.
That's right, yeah.
And he never upgraded beyond novice.
No.
And so I looked online on the FCC's website, and it had never been reassigned, so I applied for the vanity to get that call sign.
Yeah.
And of course, back then, there was communications that we have today, that wasn't a thing. So staying in touch with people, your only choices were ham radio or CB, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So talk to me a little bit about as you started the ham radio path, as it took you down the road. I'm sure there was some experimentation, some radios. How did you use radios back then?
Well, we used radios mainly would be in our home. Later on in the years, My brother Lewis had a ham radio in his car, but I was still using mine at home.
Now, I remember growing up, ham radio being very much a part of our life because cell phones didn't come along until I was in my late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
So I remember taking family vacations and having a 2-meter mobile in the car. I don't remember what brand it was. I just remember it had them red LEDs.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
And had 14652. We talked a lot
Yeah.
on that, and it was common for people to use that.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever find yourself messing around on CB radio, or were you just strictly
Yes,
ham?
I did when I was younger before I got my ham license. I was on CB radio for a while, and there was a lot of people around here, good people, that were very good at letting you talk with them, and they would talk to you, and it was just like a good family get-together with CB operators. A lot different than it is today.
I'm sure. Now, this would have been the 50s and 60s, right?
Mm-hmm. It would have been mostly the 60s for me.
Okay. So, from hearing the stories, if I remember correctly, that you met somebody pretty important on the CB radio.
Yeah, I did. That was my wife right over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we used to talk on the CB radio, and she only lived a couple of miles from me, so I would talk to her all the time. And then one time I told her I was going to come by and pick her up and go get a pizza. She didn't believe me until I showed up, and her dad, Lake Chapman, was a mechanic, and there she was. I didn't pay any attention to it, but she was wearing old mechanic clothes and grease and whatnot on her. It didn't matter to me though. So that's the way that got started.
So you used radio to meet Mom.
That's right.
That's-
Absolutely.
Now, y'all had call signs too back then, didn't you?
Yeah.
Or handles, as they were called.
Well, yeah. Well, the handle was her handle was Sweet Thing,
Sweet Thing.
and I was little brother,
Little brother.
and my brother Lynn was baby brother, and let's see, Lewis was a big brother. So, big brother, little brother, and baby brother. We all three were hams.
That's pretty cool. So you and Mom got married, and how long you and Mom been married now?
A little over 55 years.
55 years.
Yeah.
55 years. That's amazing.
Wow.
You and Mom got married, but there was some driving factors behind you guys getting married. And if I remember correctly, it was because your draft pick was coming up.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit, because ham radio played a little bit of a role in your duty assignment for the Navy, right?
Well, not really my duty assignment, but I was, being a ham radio operator, I ended up in San Francisco on a ship, aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, and so that was when we were home ported in the base. There was a place on where I was at that had radio equipment in it, and since I was licensed to use it, I got to use it any time I wanted to, and most of the time I was the only one that was there.
Your job in the Navy was a radio operator, and you
That's
got
right.
classed in that because of how well you did at Morse code, right?
Yeah, used to back then when you joined, they would give every Navy person, they would require him to take a code test, a Morse code test. And so since I knew Morse code, that gave me a little bit of advantage. So when we took the test, the instructor called me in and he asked me if I was a ham radio operator. I said, yes, I am. He said, well, you made a perfect score on your code. And so then they decided to put me in communications on board the ship. So I was a radioman the whole time I was in the Navy.
Seemed like I remember there was a time or two you were able to use ham radio on board the ship.
Yes, used it a few times, but not a lot. But yeah, I did communicate some. I can't remember if I used it to talk to her, but I did use it some to talk to other people.
Now you ETS'd out of the Navy, and
Oh, one other thing is I was able to talk to my wife, Gloria, at that place where I got to be in the building to use the ham radio equipment. I would call her on the phone, and she would go over to my brother's house where he had ham radio equipment, and so we would talk to one another on the ham radio. She would be at his house, and I was on board. I was at the radio building, and I was talking to her. So that way we didn't have to spend a lot of money for phone calls, because it was very expensive to use telephones on long distance. So that helped out a lot.
I'm sure it did. Now, during this time, you and Mom were living in Newport News, Virginia, right?
That's right.
And so, you know, ham radio obviously played a critical role keeping the family in touch with each other, and I'm sure letters and cassette tapes probably played a big role too.
Yeah, it did.
Now, your time served in the Navy would have been during the Vietnam era.
Yes.
Right. Now, it seemed like I remember you received an important message while you were on board the ship toward the end of your tour.
Yeah.
You remember that message?
Yeah. We were in the Indian Ocean, and let's see, I think it was during the India-Pakistan War, and we were sent out to the Indian Ocean just to watch things. The way my wife tells me is she was watching it on the news, and they made it sound like we were under fire and all that kind of thing, but all we were doing was just riding around in the ocean, just following orders until they told us to turn around and go back to port.
You were on duty and received the message to order you back to port, right?
Yeah, I was there when the message came through, because I was in radio room, and we were advised by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to go back to the port.
And this was before satellite communications, and you obviously didn't have cell phones or a landline telephone. It was all radio, right?
That's right, all radio.
Yeah. So you come home, and you guys make your home here, and you know, things start settling down. But that wasn't the end for radio for you.
No.
You know, after we moved where you guys live now, one of my memories was Saturday mornings, you being out here on HF radio, doing something with what's called a phone patch.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about a phone patch, what a phone patch did or does.
Well, I had a friend named Earl Finley.
Hang on a minute. Okay.
His dad was the mayor of Pickens for several years, and so Earl ended up in South America. Well, he actually ended up in Venezuela and different places. But every Saturday morning, he would call me on the ham radio, and I would patch him into the telephone line through the radio, and he would talk to his mother for quite a while, and just check on her and everything. And so that was a lot of fun. And a good service to provide.
So for our viewers and our listeners, a phone patch, back then, remember there's no cell phones during this time, and it was extremely expensive to make international phone calls. So locally, the telephone line would come into Dad's ham shack, and Dad had some equipment that would tie that phone line into the HF ham radio, relaying and allowing his friend Earl, who was overseas, to talk on HF radio to his mom, who was on the telephone line. And you actually, it wasn't automatic. You had to actually do to hold the push to talk button down on the mic while Mom was talking to Earl, right?
That's right.
They did that. I remember that growing up every Saturday morning, and you doing that.
Yeah.
And I'd come into the building and I'd have to be quiet. And when you're my age and me, being quiet was not easy.
I also got to communicate with several preachers around the, well, especially in South America again. They would contact me, and I would contact their family through the ham radio and phone line, and let them talk without having to pay an expensive bill.
Now you worked for a short time. You worked at an appliance store in Easley, Owen Radio.
Yes.
And you worked on CB radios of all sorts, because I guess in the 70s, you know, 70s was the heyday of CB radio,
Oh, yeah,
especially when Smokey and the Bandit came out.
It was.
I remember you telling me a story about a CB radio you worked on for a gentleman that he kept telling you that it just wasn't getting out. It wasn't getting out, and the radio was fine. It was transmitting. Everything was doing what it was supposed to do, and you did something to the meter indicator on it to solve the problem. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he never was convinced that he didn't have a problem with the radio, and he would bring it in and I would check it, and I could not find anything wrong with it. And so I got kind of tired of him coming in telling me it wasn't working right. So I pulled a little trick without his knowledge. I turned the needle up on the radio, that whenever you transmit, that would be the power level on the needle, and so I gave it back to him. He came back a few days and he said, "Well, I don't know what you did, but that thing works better now than it ever did." All I did was just change the needle.
You just made that meter make it look like it was putting more power out.
That's right.
You know, we see that today in the comms world. Everybody wants the latest and greatest widget. You know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
if you've got a 5-watt radio, suddenly the 8-watt radio is going to be the greatest thing, or the 10-watt radio.
Yeah.
And you know, and you and I both know that it's so much more than just the power out.
Oh yeah, and then back then the legal limit was 5 watts.
Yeah.
And it probably still is, I'm not sure, but you could only transmit with 5 watts of power.
So one of my earliest memories of ham radio was with you and a ham radio friend of yours on top of a mountain. I couldn't have been 3 or 4 years old, and you took me with you, and y'all were working on a repeater.
Yeah.
And I don't remember much other than getting stuck up there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's no cell phones, no telephones. You know, what did you use? What did you use to call for help?
Well, I was driving a box truck, had a bunch of communications equipment in it to work on things like that. And so I pulled up to where the repeater was on Sassafras Mountain. And so when I got finished, I was backing down the road and got off in a bunch of leaves and got stuck. And I couldn't, I think you were with me, wasn't you?
Yeah, sure was.
Sleep, maybe.
I was asleep to start with.
Yeah. So I ended up using my ham radio, which was in the truck, to call one of my friends on the ham radio and told him I needed some help. I think, let's see, can't remember who that was.
It was Doug Fagan, wasn't it?
Doug Fagan, yeah, that was Doug Fagan. And so he was miles from where I was, but he came up there and helped me get out of the leaves and got me going.
Obviously, communications didn't stop there for you, but it did take a back burner for several years. Life, has a way of doing that. And then when I went to college, again, this is before cell phones, it was long distance to call from school where I was, even though it was just one county away, to home. And that was when my interest peaked on ham radio. And you offered to me that, hey, if you'll pass your technician class, I'll buy you a radio. And so I did, and you bought me an Alinco DJ 580.
I remember that one. Yeah.
That was that was top of the line in the early '90s. It was a 2-meter 440, keypad programmable, obviously, and I was also a volunteer at the fire department there at school, and it was cool because I could use the radio to listen to the fire department and the dispatch.
Yeah. Then you finally got into working on a lot of equipment, radio equipment.
Sure did, and that was where, all those years, and then of course when I started working on it and learning the electronics piece, you were a big help in that to me. And again, during those times the internet wasn't available, so you wasn't like you could Google it.
No.
And, I think back to working on cars, the Chilton's auto manuals. Now we just YouTube everything.
That's right.
And then you got involved with South Carolina Baptist Disaster Relief doing communications.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your starts there.
Well, you got me started in that, really.
Yeah, I guess I did.
Because you were working in emergency management in Anderson County. And the South Carolina Baptist Disaster Relief had a training session in Anderson. And so you were involved with that, with being with emergency operations.
We were a host county there, and so I had to take the command post down there for the weekend. And I said, well, we were going through some struggles, at home and in the family. And so I thought, this would be a good time. We'll get out. And you were just going to ride down with me and hang out in the command post. And a friend of mine, Howard Murphy, talked you into signing up for the training.
Well, you were actually the one that talked me into it.
Oh, was it? I thought it was Howard.
Because I called you and asked you if, or told you I was going to come down and just hang around with you. So when I got down there, you talked me into signing up. Well, I went to sign up, but I didn't have any money to sign it.
That's right. We didn't have any cash with us. And Howard Murphy
gave me the $25 it took to register for the communications training. I never will forget that. Now, every time I see him, I always thank him for what he did. I hadn't seen him in a long time, though.
And of course, that evolved. You did several deployments with communications, but you also took more advanced training and became qualified as an incident commander.
That's right.
And
I was an incident commander several years with disaster relief.
I think it was all said and done with. You might have had as many or more deployments that I had just with disaster relief.
Yeah, that's right. So Lewis taught me a lot. He probably taught me everything I know about ham radio. And he was such a good listener and a good teacher. And he did a lot to get me involved in ham radio. And he did the same with Lynn, too.
Do you think it's fair to say that maybe as ham radio operators, we as a community should probably spend a little more time teaching the next person?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
I think so many times, especially in the YouTube and the social media communities, we argue about piddly things when it comes to communication. What we ought to be doing is teaching the next person.
That's right.
So one of my fears is, we saw this during Hurricane Helene, is the technology that we've become so dependent on is still very fragile.
Oh yeah, it is.
And it's reliable, don't get me wrong, but you know, once you lose that infrastructure, you don't have the systems in place to communicate anymore.
No.
And I think it's important that we start teaching and telling these stories of how we used to do business, because you know what, we got along.
Yeah.
When we had the radios, we talked CB radios, ham radio. It was all. I remember.
I had my first taste of repeater when repeaters started. The only one in this area was in Greenville on Paris Mountain, and so my brother, he bought a couple of old police radios, you know, big hump, goes in the back of the trunk, and so we wanted to get hooked up with the repeater on Paris Mountain, but it required a tone. You had to have a tone to open it up, and so I don't know who found out that you could do it, but you could whistle, hold the microphone button and whistle the tone, and that would bring up the repeater, so
Wow.
you could talk that way. That was the early days of repeaters, and that was an old RCA car phone, vacuum tubes, but it worked. So Lewis and I would talk a lot. We lived about 2 miles apart. And I always thought it was so great to hold a button and the signal will go to the mountain on Paris Mountain, and then it would repeat and go back to my brother Lewis's house over there, and that's the way we would communicate, not direct between point to point, but we would communicate through the repeater on the mountain.
So here we are. You're retired now. You and Mom are just hanging out on the farm and then going to my sister's little boys' ball games.
Yeah.
A lot. But you're still involved with the radio, aren't you?
Oh yeah. And not in the same way, because years ago it used to be mostly I would just talk to people all around the world using voice radio. But now a lot of things have gone digital. That's where you came in. And you taught me a lot about digital communications and helped me out to get started with that. So, and that's what I still do. I do a lot of digital communications as a hobby, and also part of the Pickens County Communications Group that's made up of ham radio operators that all support communications during disasters and things like that.
You know, something you and I've talked about a lot is, I know I was resistive in the early days, but now I see that there's value in all sorts of methods, but GMRS has become a key part of emergency communications in our area in recent years, hasn't it?
It has. It's become a big part of communications. And one thing that helped that, you know, GMRS has been around for years, but the license was so expensive, most people couldn't afford it. So a few years ago when they changed that, I think it cost $70 for a license for 5 years, and then the FCC dropped it down to $35, and when that happened, $35 for 10 years operation, then that brought a lot of people on board to GMRS, and they provide a good service too. They do a lot of things that ham radio operators do when it comes to disasters and things like that. They do operate on different frequencies, but they're licensed to do it, and they're really helping a lot in that area.
And the GMRS, the FCC license covers your whole family, not just you.
That's right.
Whereas an amateur radio license or ham radio license is just the individual.
Yeah, and you don't have to take a test for GMRS. You just, you don't have to take a test to get a GMRS license. You just have to apply for it and then it get approved by the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. And then they'll mail it back to you or send it to you through email. And
so I think one thing that we've watched evolve over the years is in the social media world, or in the communications world, it's almost like there's groups of people that feel like this is the box for emergency communications, and if it doesn't fit inside this box, then you can't do it.
Yeah.
And what we saw, especially what we saw out of Helene, is that, man, all bets are off.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got to have a tool in your toolbox for everything, whether it's GMRS,
That's right.
FRS, ham radio, whatever the case may be. And that doesn't happen by just buying a radio, putting it in on the shelf and letting it go. It happens over playing with it. And I think for me, my emphasis, or my push to get people involved in ham radio, is that gives you the abilities to experiment. It opens the doors to learn and to train and to get more exposure, whereas the other services don't so much.
That's right.
So all throughout our video session, the people that you and I have mentioned have been other men who have mentored, who have poured into us.
That's right.
And I think that's important, because in the last several years, we've heard about toxic masculinity and things like that, but it's been these men that have taken the time to invest in us in this world. So do you think, how important do you feel like that was for you, and then how important do you feel like it is for us as men to pour into other young men?
Well, I don't know if I would have got into ham radio if it hadn't have been important, and if I hadn't have been mentored by other men. Not just my brother, but other hams in the area too. So we need to carry that on. Mentor the younger folks as they get started.
And we've had the opportunity to mentor numerous people over the years.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, you think about it from the beginning. Your dad encouraged your older brother, who encouraged you, who encouraged me, who encouraged my son.
Encouraged Lynn.
Yeah, and so 4 generations of, of people were started by one individual. Yeah. Your dad, and then the people that we've been able to help and take along with us outside the family, I think is really cool. And so recently you received a dementia diagnosis.
Yes, that's right.
So we're in the early stages of that, but I hear there are a lot of times, we talk with other hams and other people who are resistant to try for a ham radio license or for a digital mode or something. Well, I just can't do that. I'm not smart enough, or whatever the reason or the excuse is. Do you feel like staying involved with new modes, with digital, with radios, with ham radio, do you feel like that helps you in keeping your brain active?
Yeah, I think so. I've always enjoyed trying newer stuff, and with ham radio, the newer stuff comes along pretty quick now, and I really enjoy getting involved with that. And I know sometimes that I struggle with it sometimes, but I keep at it, and I think it really helps me when I can solve a problem. Maybe something's not working right, that I can solve a problem and be able to get it to work.
I agree, and I think I see you doing everything from WinLink to FLDigi to FT8, JS8, even DMR. I mean, I don't program stuff for you. You still do all your programming. Yeah. So I feel like from watching that being involved keeps you active and helps keep your mental faculties about you, as we've often heard folks say.
Yeah, my first try is to try to fix it myself. Yeah. If I have something I don't quite understand, then I ask you or ask somebody for some help. But I've got that drive that I've got to be able to figure this out.
Oh yeah, and there's something I often will say to you when you get frustrated with it. There's a little something I say to you. Do you remember what that is?
No, I don't.
I said, don't worry, we'll figure it out.
No.
Yeah. It'll be all right. We'll figure it out. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this session with me and my dad talking about emergency communications, its beginnings or the origins for us, and as well as how it applies to everyday life. Please, before you leave, if you've watched this far, hit that like and subscribe button, and share this with some other folks. There's a lot of people out there that need to hear our story, and we want to encourage others to share theirs as well. Take care.